Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say. And in this video, it's all about Australia. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me, and let's go to the land down under. Thank you for watching. This story was sent in by Dan. My mom and I were driving home on a very isolated road in Tamworth, New South Wales, Australia. It was just coming on dusk, and we could see this bright blue luminescence through the trees, about 300 meters to our right. My mom initially waved it off as a radio tower that are about the area. It suddenly shot straight toward us through the trees like a mad drone. It paralleled the car instantly and started buzzing in front and behind and all over us for around 6 whole kilometers. It was instantly loud and bright. We were traveling at around 160 kilometers an hour, the fastest the car would go, and this thing stayed with us until a truck coming the other way flashed its high beams toward us as it approached. We've never talked on it. My mom is a JP, and she'll swear on what she saw. We've gone back and tried to figure out what it was a few times. We never told anybody publicly because humiliation is a big thing on that stuff around here. We could see the craft, the panels, and feel the heat from it. Nothing is out that way in the country. There is a coal seam called Burning Mountain. There's Chaffee Dam, a body of water, and not much else. There's no military bases. There's no experimental flying combine harvester factories. Oz is full of stuff that happens and never gets explained. And this thing happened around Tarporley Creek, New South Wales, Australia, in 1993. The thing looked like a bronze, smooth diamond or triangle up close. It had recessed panel lines that looked darker. As my mom puts it, it was Volkswagen-sized. It flew in ballistically impossible ways through the trees and then about us, sometimes shooting up into the sky kilometers away from us and then back almost instantly. It made a very loud static-charged noise, like a jet flying overhead and being recorded on a static cassette tape. It left no trace on our car. Others have also been subject to incidents they won't really speak of. Our scout leader had crop circles on his farm just north of the spot. So thank you to Dan for sending in that story. I hope I could do it justice for you. So I live in Australia, and this one night I was walking home late in the evening with one of my friends. We were crossing this bridge that's near my house. Suddenly, we see a black mass near the creek. We stop to look. I presumed at first that it was just a person or a dog. The thing stands up, and it's absolutely massive. It walks a few steps and then sits down in the ferns. It looks like a gorilla almost. It suddenly turns its head and looks at us very quickly. Its eyes glint. We both turn and sprint home. I never looked back to see if it followed us, but I was too scared at that point. My dad's friend Ken always tells this story when we're out camping. Ken is this giant Aboriginal dude, like 6'5" or taller, and he weighs about 120 kilograms or so. He's one of those really hardened dudes covered in scars and stuff. Anyways, Ken and all his mates, who are also tough as nails, were out camping in western New South Wales, just chilling by the fire. Suddenly, all the cicadas in the area decide to stop all at once. As the silence becomes prolonged, a giant, and this is coming from Ken, so it must have been massive, this giant hairy dude calmly walks up to the fire and just looks at all of them. It calmly sniffs and grunts toward all the guys camping, who are now frozen, and then casually steals some food and then bumbles back into the surrounding bush. All the guys just freak out and bail. The story's pretty tame, but those guys are all crazy, and for them to admit that they were spooked off, it just adds another level of weirdness to the tale, how they all felt frozen, like they couldn't move. When retelling the story, Ken always looks legitimately spooked. In 2012, I was 17. My family and I were driving from Perth to Victoria. We experienced some weird stuff in southern Australia. We were about 50 kilometers out of Peterborough, the middle of nowhere, basically. My family were commenting on how eerie it felt out there amongst the hills. We needed fuel at some point, so we pulled up to a random servo. The place looked normal enough, except there was one woman working there. She looked almost dead, or anorexic or something. Missing teeth, barely said a word. Her eyes were all weird. She just watched us from behind the counter. I asked to use the heads. She points outside, doesn't say anything. We go out, and the ceilings to the toilets have collapsed in. The other one is broken and cracked and no water in it. I go back in and ask what gives. She says there's a bathroom in the town center. And we think, that's weird, but alright. Dad says that he'll come with me, that he has a weird feeling. Everyone else goes back to the car. Dad and I go into this, quote, town, which is basically a ghost town. All the buildings are colonial era. The floors have all caved in. There's no windows in any buildings. Most of them are boarded up, and it's dusty as hell. We eventually find this bathroom that was mentioned to us. It was basically a giant warehouse-looking building that had rows and rows of showers, about 50 of them. We both feel like that we're watched the entire time that we're in there, so we do our business and we leave pronto. Outside, we see two metalhead-looking guys with a van. They're just screwing around in this old cemetery and don't notice us. My dad and I are almost running at this stage. We come across this World War I commemorative statue. The problem is that it wasn't there just a few minutes ago. Everything else in the town was decrepit and decaying, but this statue was perfect, like it had been recently polished. But again, it wasn't there when we walked down the street the first time. My dad and I are just bolting it to the car. We get back in, and everyone's saying that they feel a weird presence and to just get the hell out of there. As we drive off, we look down a random side street that we had passed, and we see 5 or 6 people standing in the middle of the road. All of them are super disheveled and staring at us. They continue to watch us until we disappear out of sight. And the weirdest thing about this whole place isn't the buildings, or the people, or the bathroom, or the woman. It's that we haven't been able to find this town ever again. There's no mention of it on the internet, Google Maps, or any physical map. It's just not there. And when I've driven through the area again, nothing. I don't know what the hell we experienced. So this didn't happen to me, it happened to my mom, and this was in the 1980s. My mom was friends with this couple who would later become my godparents. She knows this woman because she used to governess for the older son of a family that she works for. They had fallen on some financially bad times due to a harsh summer drought, and livestock is undersized, so nobody wants to buy them. So they routinely trap foxes and sell the pelts. They also kill dingoes and sell those pelts to keep their heads afloat. They go check the fox traps one night. They're all on a flatbed Holden Ute drive to a northern paddock that backs onto a national park. The husband gets out of his car and is slightly ahead of Mom and her friend. Mom and her friend are lagging behind, joking and laughing. All of a sudden, they hear a roar, a super loud, super deep roar. Mom swears it sounded nothing like a large wildcat. There were rumors at the time. The husband comes running out of the darkness, screaming to get back in the car. They're all scrambling for the car. The dude's in shock and slams it in reverse. He's just reversing wildly through the paddock for a good kilometer. He ends up hitting a fence and snaps out of it and starts to drive the car normally. They ask what the hell he saw in there. He says he's not sure, but it was huge. He's around 6'5" and he's built like a brick crap house. They get to the house and he tells the women to lock themselves in the bathroom. He patrols the house for the rest of the night. They go out at daylight and they find footprints in the dirt, and there's blood everywhere. The fox is torn up and eaten. The fox trap is broken and twisted and ripped apart. They're quite sure that they saw a Yowie, the Aussie Bigfoot. This was back when I was about 18 years of age. I loved fishing, and I would go fishing every weekend, rain, hail, or shine. I heard about this spot up a creek that's only accessible at low tide, and is supposed to be crazy for flathead on a full moon. So obviously, I gathered 2 friends together and a girl that I was keen on at the time. It's about a 15-minute walk through mud and sand, including a 10-minute wade through waist-deep water. This is all in Hervey Bay, Queensland, so there's sharks everywhere, and there's a very real chance of a croc being around. We fish for about 2 hours or so, and it's terrible. All we get are small whiting and a few shovel noses. We decide to explore the sand flats a bit before the tide changes and we have to leave. We find this small trail into the mangroves. It's about a meter wide. We're standing about 10 meters from it, and suddenly, something about 3 feet high, incredibly fast, runs from the sand flats to the trail. Everyone says that it looked like a troll. We were half joking. We decided that it must be some kind of feral pig or a dog. We ended up leaving about half an hour later, but the girl I was keen on forgot her phone. We go back with her to look for it. I'm hoping to get in her good books if we find it. She thinks that she may have dropped it while we were exploring. We go back to the sand flats near the trail. Suddenly, she stops dead in her tracks, and I hear her gasp. There's an animal standing in front of us, clearly illuminated by the moon. It's about 3 feet high, completely covered in hair, and arms down past its knees. It runs on 2 legs up the trail in the mangroves. We just run as fast as we can out of there. Something weird too is that a couple years prior, when I was 16, I liked to ride my BMX bike through a small set of jumps and berms that were built deep in the woods. In order to get there, you had to get off the bike and cross swamps and stuff. My 3rd time there is when this particular thing happened. As soon as I get there, I can feel that there's something off, like that oh so great feeling of being watched. But I do my laps around the track anyways. Then I stop after a few minutes for a drink of water. I see something black and roughly 3 feet high on the ground, about 20 meters in front of me. At the time I couldn't tell if it was shadowy or if that was the color of its hair. It moves left to right through the undergrowth, covering almost 10 meters of bush in about 1 second. I absolutely nope the hell out of there, and I never go back. Now, fast forward to the incident from when I was 18. After that happened, I spoke to a local Aboriginal elder about it. He told me that they're called Junjudee, which is basically a small Yowie-like creature. I can't find barely any information online about these things, but I did find an anecdotal reference to mangrove men living in North Queensland, which highly resemble what I saw. So I'm a car guy, and one thing that I like to do is usually on a Friday night, I'll go out for a long drive. I like to cruise around looking for a decent and long, quiet, rural road just to really open up on. So after a while, I find a good one, and I'm tearing it down. This is outside of Sydney, by the way. There's nothing down there but a school at the end. It kinda ends in a crossroads after this school. One way goes nowhere, the other way also goes nowhere, and then the other one leads on for a fair way into the bush, with the occasional house and stuff out there. It's just been blowing a gale for the past 2 days, so there's a fair amount of fallen sticks and leaves, so I ride a tad slower than expected. The road that I was on was quite narrow all the way, and I figured that my car can handle it no worries. So I'm driving down at maybe 60 kilometers an hour average. There's no streetlights, and my high beams aren't the best, but they help a bit. After about 5 minutes in, I notice that the radio of my car is quiet. I fiddle with the volume. Nothing. It's turned right, but there's no sound or static. I check the other stations, and it's the same thing. I was concerned by this. I say my car was a shitbox, but my car isn't old, nor in any condition outside of usual wear. So I just turn the radio off, and I continue down this road. I notice on the side of the road there are what I would call these strange-looking plants. They extend about 2 feet high and spread out in the perfect shape of a skeleton hand, 4 tall limbs, and then a shorter thumb lower down. My brain immediately draws this connection about them. At first, it was every few hundred meters that I would see one, but as I drive on, they're becoming more and more dense. About 5 kilometers down this road, the surface seems to suddenly become darker. The random debris and sticks on the road disappear, so the ride is much quieter. I drive on feeling a little uneasy for another few kilometers until I reach the end of the road. The road ends at this gate that's for a fire trail. I pass another entrance to something similar about 1 kilometer before the end of the road. I head back, and I'm still feeling uneasy. I arrive at what seems to be the entrance to a national park. I can't read the sign from my car. I get out with my torch, and I start walking over to it. I'm about 10 feet from the car when I suddenly realize something is really wrong. The wind has stopped. It was windy all the time that I've been driving, and it's still windy as I'm typing this out. But as I was standing there, total stillness, silence, serious silence. I don't know how many of you are from Australia, but normally the bush has some noise, even quiet noise, but there was nothing here. So I'm starting to freak out, and I say screw the sign, and I just retreat back to my car. I left the lights on and the door open, thankfully. I get back in the car, and I sit there before turning the engine back on. It's real uneasy, but for some reason, I turn the lights off for a split second. There's no houses this far out, by the way. The last one is maybe a kilometer down the road. I look at the entrance for the park. There's a small orange dot that I can only guess was the light from a cigarette end, and I have no plan on sticking around to see who's this far out, with no car, punching darts in the pitch black. I gun it out of there, really freaking out at this point. I'm desperate to just get the hell off this road, to see a building, light, a sign of civilization. So I'm tearing down this road, and I don't feel much better coming to the first few houses. I keep driving excessively fast for the road, driving on the other side of the road, skidding a little bit on the corners and stuff. I come to probably the longest straight part in the road, maybe 5 kilometers from the cross part. I see a figure walking on the side of the road with a light. My initial senses scream nope, but as I approach I can tell that it's a person. I pull up alongside of them. It's a woman, really young, maybe a late teen, early 20s. She has brown hair and wearing casual clothing. I say, "Are you all right, miss?" She says, "Not really. My bus missed my stop and dropped me off here, and I'm pretty scared. It's just so bloody dark, and you're the first car I've seen in 10 minutes. I'm still freaked out from the national park entrance thing, but I heard her clear enough. There were no bus stops down this road, which confused me, and I didn't see any other cars all the way. But she was obviously lost and felt uneasy too. I've never actually picked up a hitchhiker before, but I felt like there would be some unseen danger sitting in the darkness that would harm her if I drove off. I say, "Do you know where you're going? Would you like a lift?" She looks behind her and around into the darkness. "Yes, please." She's clearly unsettled, so she climbs in and we drive on. She asks what I'm doing this far out. I tell her that I was out for a drive but got more than I bargained for. I tell her about the end of the road, the silence, and the cigarette thing in the dark. She seems further freaked out. I'm not settled at all, but having another person helps. She tells me that she could hear twigs cracking behind her in the bush, to the sides, and all the time that she's been there. She'd been using her phone as a light, since it had no signal to call anyone, but it was almost dead when I came along. And I feel like, oh, I guess I'm the knight in shining armor right now. Then I say, "Did you say that you heard cracking twigs behind you?" I look at the side of the road. I'm still 3 kilometers or so from that crossroads. On the way there were maybe 20 of those weird skeleton hand plants every 100 meters. Now there are none. Not one of them. No way am I not seeing them or something. They're just gone. Okay, that's really odd, I explain to her. Both of us are further unsettled. I'm driving fast. I'm normally more cautious with a passenger, but I don't think either of us were concerned. I get to the crossroads maybe 2 minutes later. I tear down past the school and off the lead-in road. I drive to the nearest town to this woman's house. I give her my number before she leaves. I tell her to call me if this ever happens again. I wasn't trying to flirt, but she took it down without hesitation. Her mother or someone is on the porch waiting for her. She thanks me gratefully and runs to hug her daughter. They go inside, I wave by, and I drive off. I pull out feeling much better that I'm now in town. Now usually that would be the end of the story, but for some godforsaken reason, I went back. The next night, I went back down through the lead-in road. It had just rained a bit, and you know that fog that seems to sit on the ground in horror films like in cemeteries? Well, that was everywhere, and it was thick. So I'm driving faster than I was the night before because there was no more fallen debris. It was uneventful as I was tear-assing down the road. I get to those oh-so-ominous crossroads, and I actually stop for the first time and have a major second thought. I tell myself, 10 minutes, no more, and I overcome common sense. I can still remember the road and that there's no debris now, so I can drive faster. I think I'm driving about 70 or so. About 200 meters down, the ground fog gets really heavy. It's actually reducing my full beams. So I slow down and continue at 60. I see only one of the weird-ass plants. The rest are all gone. And I'm actually on the lookout for any bus stops this time. I don't see any though. I'm somewhat creeped out, but it's just from the atmosphere plus my last experience on this road. I continue driving, getting excessively fast for the conditions. I get to where the national park entrance is and I keep going. I say aloud to myself, this corner is really tight. My back wheels skid slightly and caught me off guard. I regain control, so there's no worries. I'm good at driving stupidly, and I know my car well. The second I pass the national park, I instantly get the feeling again that something is wrong. I don't know how to describe it, but it was like a capsule of fear burst in my stomach. I felt suddenly sick. I feel as if I turn at the T-junction and go toward the fire trail gate, I will meet my doom. My heart is beating like a war drum. Since my body won't allow me to turn the steering wheel that way, I do the only logical thing I think to do. I handbrake turn the T-junction. It seems like it's in slow motion, but I lose most of my speed. And then I see it. It's a lot brighter than before because I can see it with my high beams on. No more than 70 meters ahead of me is a brightly glowing orange dot, smack bang in the middle of the road. The only way in or out of where I was, and it was blocking my exit. All I can really compare it to is one of those roadside reflectors, but there are none on this road. Now, being the weirdo that I am, I've brought a few things with me, including a combat knife, a flashlight, and a lighter, even though I don't smoke. I take the flashlight. It's one of those really powerful mag lights. I shine it at the thing through the windscreen to get a better look at the guy smoking in the middle of the road. Although it's brighter than any dart I've ever seen, I still assume that's what that is. It's humanoid, but very, very dark. I can't make out any clothing or facial features apart from the orange dot that sits right between where the eyes should have been. I freak out and nearly crap myself. The dark black humanoid with a glowing orange dot in its head and no facial features is blocking my exit. I stare at it for approximately 5 seconds before it starts moving forward. As it walks, its legs seem to grow thinner, but freakishly taller. The rest of it also stretches, except the head. This thing stops at being 8 feet tall, maybe 9 feet, but it continues pacing forward. My mind kicks in. I slam the car into reverse, and I back up to the T-junction as far as I can retreat. I'm still locked onto it. It does not stop moving toward me. I fail to notice the other movement until they are visible, but there's 4 men dressed in what I would describe as, I guess, homeless attire, emerge from the bush on the side of the park. They're all staring at me, but I know they can't actually see me against the headlights, but I swear I could feel their gaze. These people seem to ignore the orange dot-headed thing walking at me and just stare. It reciprocates. They seem totally out of it, but definitely human. I'm not religious, but I pray aloud to anything listening to help me. This thing is maybe 30 meters away from my car at this point, fully visible in my high beams. I'm trapped like a rat. I either floor it, potentially kill it, or have it kill me and ruin my car. I sit there and accept my death or try and stab the 9-foot-tall thing with my 6-inch combat knife, which I don't think is going to go very well. I get about a second to choose. I decide that my life is worth more than my car, and I floor it toward the thing. As I shift into second, the thing leaps and pushes me to the edge of a heart attack. Its legs recoil like an elastic as it jumps up. It lands behind me, and I can see it in the mirror. It turns around, and I see the orange dot or disc thing glowing. I can almost feel rage and malice emanating from it. And then it screamed. The best way for me to describe it is for you to look up the Chuma scream from the Big Les show, lower the pitch by about 300%, and play it at half speed. Otherwise, it was a deep, almost human-like, but a full-on scream. And I was thinking that it had to be heard by the residents of the nearest house for sure. It was 20 meters behind me, and when it screamed, my ears rang. The 4 men standing on the side of the road, whom I can barely see, start running. I catch a slight glimpse of them in my taillights, but they can't catch my car. I can still see the orange dot though, and it's bobbing as if it's running toward me. I can't see its body anymore. My heart is in my throat, and I'm going to throw up. I'm in no state to really drive. I trace my way back to the crossroads, sort of autonomously. I pull the handbrake and throw myself out. I vomit like a 16-year-old who just chugged a bottle of cheap vodka. I retch for maybe 5 minutes before I collapsed over the bonnet, and I struggle back into the driver's seat. I drink water and I crack my window. I drive very slowly until my adrenaline rush clears. My heart moves from my throat back to my chest. I drive home, still shaking. And besides that, that's it. I tried my best to draw some pictures, but I'm not an artist. But here they are. And also, if you ever go there for yourself, do so at your own risk. It's Bloodwood Road. Start near the school and move northeast. Go down it. It's not hard. You'll see a T-junction about 6 kilometers down, and both ends split into fire trails as far as I'm aware, and one of them is called Maramara Ridge Trail. So, what'd you think of those encounters? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have one of your own? I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you want to. I also have a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to donate to the channel. No pressure though. And with that, I think I'll put some other videos up on the screen that you might enjoy. And with that as well, I think I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump. Thank you for watching.